Let me take you back and maybe use this picture behind us as a reference. Tell us a little bit about the context for this photograph with you and Dr. King, and then I want to talk a little bit about when you came in to be a part of his leadership team and what that time was like.
Well, that picture was taken in Frogmore, South Carolina. We would go down to Penn Center once a year and have a retreat. Mm-hmm. We wanted to focus at that time on poverty. So we have achieved public accommodations, the right to vote, but there's poverty. And that if you're going to deal with poverty, you cannot deal with it from a black point of view, because whoever's in the dark, they see about the same or don't see it. So that led to a staff meeting, which whites from Appalachian Smoky Mountains were there. Native Americans were there for the first time. Latinos from Chavez group was there. Some blacks from the Deep South and some Jewish allies from New York. We all met at Frogmore. By that time, we'd asked me to become his fund developer. We were getting black businesses in Chicago to contribute, and we were raising money for the first time. She thought I would be a fundraiser and organizer. So that picture was a kind of promotion piece. So we could kind of tell us. And so here we are today. 44% of all Americans make less than $15 an hour today. 40% women, about 44% African Americans. 54% of African Americans make less than $15 a day. So we're the working poor. That was his last projection. How do we end poverty and end war? And he felt that war money was taken away from social uplift money, and bombs dropped in Vietnam with exploding our cities. That tension came out of that meeting.
So you described it today, and certainly we know from the history that there were some obvious impediments to empowerment that the movement took on early on. But as you got public accommodations, as the right to vote was added, and then really moving to some of the conversations around the efforts here in Chicago, the issues became more complex. And that
was another chapter, because in the South, when you go downtown and drink water, it's colored white. Crude but simple. Toilets colored white. When Rosa Parks got on the bus, the drivers, above the driver's seat was a sign, color from the rear, white from the front. Those violate punished by law. It was very simple. Come to Chicago. The question was, if you come to Chicago in the big urban north, can you find a hook here to expose northern racism as blatant and as ugly as southern racism, as ugly as the burning buses in Anderson, Alabama? That was like blatant racism. Bombing his church in the South. Would that type thing happen in the North? So 50 organizations formed the Chicago Community Council of organizations on a school situation, because we want equal racial equality, but not resource equality. Mm-hmm. So we had these inner city schools that overcrowded, and they had these what they call Willis wagons, which were really the kind of encampment by schools. And yet, 600,000 kids, the school system was so big, you couldn't quite. So Bernard Lafayette was working on our staff, was working on the west side, having youth urinate in bottles to come downtown to prove lead paint. Lead was in the paint and then in the walls. It was wrong, but it didn't grab people. Mm-hmm. Bevel's focus was on absentee landlords. People finally left the west side, went south, Florida someplace, and didn't keep the houses up. So people living in slums paying rent without. He gave me the assignment to focus on Operation Breadbasket, which to focus on these companies that were getting the profits from the black community without reciprocal trade. So that was no blacks did not pick up the garbage, and picking up garbage is a pretty good living. It's sludge is fudge if you're on the truck, I mean, if you're picking up garbage for, say, Jewel, and they got 6 cans a day, and there's 10 stores, you get that contract. Another 10 level credit, get your truck, you're in real solid business. Mm-hmm. Right now, the top company for that is Waste Management. No black is in charge of garbage collection in the city of America, for example. At that time, there were no black checkout clerks, no black store managers, and so bread basket was kind of fit for the. We couldn't get Ebony and Jet on the shelves in the black stores. Couldn't get Julius Milk and Bark outside in the shelves. So that was kind of ready made for us. And so this was part of the Chicago. And then we started trying to move. We found 25% of the black population was staying on 10% of the land. Which means if you stayed on east of Hall Street, you get a house that may cost $35,000 without a yard. And you stay west, you get a house $25,000 with front and backyard, because supply and demand. We started marching toward Gage Park, and that's when the urban north exploded. The sense that whites began to throw rocks and to hurl invectives as they had in the South, except with more venom, frankly. And one rock hit Dr. King in the head, which began to symbolize the Northern March. But his attitude was, as we went back, do you fight back? They throw bricks, you throw bricks. No. What drove that you to throw that brick? His parents had told him, if blacks come west of Hall Street, it's going to drive your property values down, which what the brokers had told them. So you got the broker in what you call blockbusting, you know. If you finally do move in, they say, niggas are coming. And so when that happens, the whites run and other blacks come in. So you had that dynamic. But the bankers who would only lend money in certain areas, the redlining of the bankers, redlining of insurance companies, those are the real culprits. They were, you know, never, the kids who were throwing rocks at us were afraid they're blacks to have a relationship. That's the public dynamics that made Chicago. And out of his death came the Fair Housing Act. But that really came out of Chicago. Out of Birmingham came public accommodations and Selma the right to vote. The Fair Housing Act and the whole idea of an urban policy came out of Chicago.
So at the time that you became more involved with Dr. King, he had a number of different folks around him. There were older establishment ministers for some of the biggest churches in the South. There were, on the other kind of end of the age spectrum, the young activists. I think John Lewis would probably be in that, Andy Young, and you were in that mode. How did Dr. King arise as the leader of this very diverse group of mostly men, and who had very different positions and statuses and perspectives that they were bringing to this kind of common cause?
He had established a reputation, dash leadership out of Montgomery. Clearly he was intellectually superior, with more than general sharp courage. And he was embraced as the leader. And in whatever resistance, he just simply had the capacity to make a case. We can only really admire him, frankly. I was asked one time, how did I get so close to him so quickly? Well, if you make $37 a week with no insurance, no on call to go to jail, there was no long line of people trying to get that kind of job. Because we did, the margin was risky, and the jailing was risky, and the pay was low, but the gratification was great. He was fortunate to have a team of rather brilliant people. Dorothy Cotton, who had been a teacher in Petersburg, Virginia, joined his staff. Is a brilliant lady. She's yet alive. Reverend Y.T. Walker, who died 2 weeks ago, was his chief of staff, a brilliant administrator and teacher, and come out of the Virginia Union. And the Young came out of seminary, went to Howard, and went to seminary, and was a very trained, refined guy. Reverend Abernathy, who was his co-partner, was a preacher with great following among other preachers. And so others of us kind of, before I met him, I went to jail July 17, 1960. And I was a freshman at the University of Illinois in Champaign. And there was a speech over the Christmas holiday. It was 25 annotated bibliographies. So I've been with my home since August. I was glad to get home. And when I got home, I went to the library to see Mrs. Smith. She said, I don't have this number of books, but my friend at the Central Library does. I'll see that. So I'll send you a note. So I took the note. She called and said, Jesse's on the way. When I got the two police were standing with, I was too naive to appreciate the scenery. So, well, she said, I'll get the books to you in 7 days. I said, 7 days? I have to do them now because I have to write speech, memorize, and do a speech contest in Champaign. She said, 7 days. I learned a big term called stacks. Imagine what I did in the stacks. So it's just two of us here. The police said, you heard what she said. So I got it, finally. I went out the back of the library. I come in the back as well. I cried. I said, this summer I intend to use this library. What I didn't realize was at the same time we were going through that tension in Greenville, over in Nashville, Reverend Lawson was training the American Baptist students. James Bevel, John Lewis, and that group was there. While they were training to do it, in Greensboro in February, they actually did it. So it was a kind of pregnant moment for change at that time. And that summer when I came home, July 17th, 7 of us went to jail. I really can't take credit for courage because I'm told if somebody calls you a nasty name, don't say a nasty name in kind. If they punch you, just tighten up. Don't respond in kind. Even to put a cigarette on your neck. Be prepared. If you can't take it, just get out the training group. And be prepared to go to jail. Jail. Okay. So we marched down about from here to almost to the Grant Park. Pretty good little ways. And we got to the library and the police knew we were coming. They said, you here to use the library? We said, yes, sir. So it was a count of 3. If you don't leave, we're going to arrest you. 1, 2. Just a minute, sir. We went back to the church. So we got back to the church and the Reverend Hall said, why are you back so quickly? They said, they're going to arrest us. Hell, that's why I sent you to go back. So I went to jail. I can't ever take credit for that courage. I got to run back to jail. And that action of having the audacity to take on the terror of racial segregation began as the breakthrough and laid the groundwork, Laura, for a new South that is now new. And the contradiction now is that those who benefit from it don't know where it came from. That is to say that from you now have Boeing in South Carolina. South Carolina is the number 1 state of tire production. Continental and all of them down in South Carolina. You have Toyota and Honda, Nissan, Hyundai, all of them in the South now. That's because the walls came down. You couldn't have had the
So you talked about this, and you mentioned that from your perspective, Dr. King and the foundation that he laid actually ended up completely transforming the South. I think you called it that he removed the
cotton curtain.
The cotton curtain.
You couldn't have had the Olympics in Atlanta behind the cotton curtain, or CNN for that matter. So you couldn't have had Alabama playing Georgia in the big game, but the showdown had we not won the battle because it was illegal for blacks and whites to play together, sit together. So all of this new Southern transformation, you couldn't even run for public office, national office, even from the South. Remember when I went to Las Vegas with the North Carolina student delegation after we'd been in jail, been arrested, and gained some freedom stature. A white guy was running for the National Democratic leader named Al House. He couldn't run without a black in his delegation. I didn't realize I was there because I was being used because I was the black in the delegation. It was all right. I found fulfillment and he found it, so he won. Well, when Jimmy Carter ran for president, he had to immediately identify with Andy Young, Dr. King's father in that group, to convince blacks he was not a typical quote-unquote Southern racist. Bush couldn't have run from Odessa, Texas on the burden of the Southern segregation label. Certainly Clinton from Hope, Arkansas, and go on the same ticket from Tennessee couldn't have run. So when the barriers came down, it freed everybody. In some sense, the value of this diversity initiative that you have here is that we really didn't know how good baseball could be until everybody could play. And why do we do baseball and football and basketball? So how do we survive and achieve so much in the context of the athletic events? Because of the rules. And that's why the rules must be the rules of inclusion must be enforced. Whenever the rules are public, the goals are clear, the referee is fair, and the score is transparent, we do very well. When the playing field is not even, rules not public, goals not clear, we don't do it because the laws of inheritance dominate the rules of fairness.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned. And frankly, for the folks that are much younger than I am, that many of whom are in the room and across the country, talk about the conversations around the reality of going to jail, not just for an overnight, but the consequences of violating the Jim Crow laws and what pressures you all were under and how Dr. King helped, frankly, navigate that with people who were concerned about taking those kinds of risks.
Well, individuals going to jail for some reason social unacceptable maintain all the barriers. In my home county, next county, Pickens County, a guy named Willie Earl was jailed, said he had whistled at a white lady. He was mentally challenged, even by that definition at that time. He went to jail, and they took him out that night and beheaded him. So jail has a certain ring to it. Once the sit-ins began, we began to take the fear out of going to jail for righteous purposes. And that became the real difference, is that we were no longer afraid. Matter of fact, if you hadn't gone to jail, that you lost your honor. Most of us who marched in Washington in '63 had as part of our portfolio how long we've been in jail, how many times we've been, because we removed because fear and ignorance stand between you and progress. You build a wall between two sets of people, and you don't know what's behind the wall. So there's ignorance and fear and hatred and violence. And it's true on both sides. The one who controls the wall controls both sides. That's why there's the best interest in keeping walls up. When walls come down, you're less ignorant, less afraid, less safe, and less violent. You begin to see people based on who will do their homework, who can argue the case, and who cannot argue the case, who can. And so part of the conversation was, how do we bring down these walls and build bridges and begin to see each other in ways different and other than through the lens of fear and race.
And how did Dr. King kind of teach you all to help you face that fear and address it?
Because on his last birthday, which we didn't really be his last birthday, how he spent it, that morning, at breakfast at home with his family around 8 o'clock, he came to church in blue jeans and a windbreaker jacket and a sports shirt. And on that occasion, how to have a multiracial coalition that coal miners down in the hole and had something in common with blacks picking cotton and Latinos picking fruit, and always working, and women not getting paid. He just been to teach us so we could see each other anew. And why were we so fearful of each other or resentful of each other in that case? Around noontime, so on the Clay brought in the cake and said, "Doc, you forgot it was your birthday." We stopped at the cake, and then Al Lowenstein started doing a workshop on how they end the war in Vietnam. To spend his own last birthday in about 60 people in a multiracial, multicultural setting, we began to develop comfort zones with each other on how to end poverty as a weapon of mass destruction, because people who are poor begin to think poorly, begin to have poor dreams and poor aspirations. So poverty has its own set of walls built into it. And then how they end the war, which we thought, so he taught. We'd have workshops. And then, of course, you listen to him preach. We took it to another level.
So when the movement advanced past kind of the obvious vestiges of Jim Crow and began to take on some of these more challenging issues like poverty, like the war, like how to build these multicultural coalitions. What were the kinds of tensions that arose, and how did Dr. King address those?
For example, I went to Hewlett Packard 3 or 4 years ago, and we began expanding our work to Silicon Valley. And we're about 30% of their business, black and brown people. And they said that they couldn't put blacks on the boards, A, because of the issue, couldn't find them, and qualifications issue, and this and that. And so there was a lawsuit filed by a company to say that they didn't have to show the EEO-1 reports, put them at a competitive disadvantage. So we bought shares of stock in about 25 companies. We went to the board meeting as a shareholder, as a sharecropper. And I said to the chairman of the board at our time to speak, I have a plan to expand our margin profit. We're not here to be helped. We're here to share in development, not the cost of doing business, but the how to grow. The 100 largest cities are majority black and brown. Those mayors and those that determine the probation of contracts and lawsuits and business. And if you can't find them, you're not looking real hard. I mean, they broke the HP split in half. Now they have 2 blacks on both boards, 4. And Twitter now has Deborah Lee on the board. And Jim Bell, who's a Boeing here, is on the board of Apple. And Ken Chenault's on the board of Facebook. And on the board, the guy who succeeded Bill Gates is John Thompson on the board at Microsoft. So it always requires a continued aggressive push, always trying to prove that we're not unequal. That's the unspoken word. Everyday black people trying to prove they're qualified. There's never an at ease moment in the black-white relationship in America. You can put on all the right kind of camaraderie, but we know there's 2 sets of rules. My heart was pained when I saw these children running in Parkland, Florida this week. God Almighty! I mean, this guy opened up on them; they didn't have a chance. But if you say that in the last 3 years, 166 blacks have been killed under age 17, it's like it's not time to discuss that. 166 killed in Chicago alone in the last 3 years, under 17, not the whole under. So we have almost adjusted to trauma, which would be a sin. You cannot address the trauma of killing. But I'm glad these kids are taking the lead because you never know which groups protests will help all of us. What's happening in Florida is helping all of us. Mm-hmm. We're making the same case about banned assault weapons and equal access to education, and we're doing for a long time. We couldn't be heard. These children are being heard now. We support them in that, and we join with them. But Dr. King will use those kind of examples to make his point.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about his experience in Chicago, because obviously the infamous hurled rock that struck him in the head brought, I think, very clear to all of us who were around at that time that the challenges of bringing the movement to the North were going to be significant. How did the challenges that he faced here, and frankly the failures and not success, how did that affect him personally? And then did it cause a recalibration of the strategy?
Not really. We were delighted. We exposed northern racism in ways you could not ignore the fact that blacks could not live in suburbs. Mm-hmm. Country Club Hills was off limits. West of Ashton was off limits. My son Jonathan was born in the Holy Cross Hospital. It must have been 52 years ago or something. The first black one in the Holy Cross Hospital. Then, so we have survived the part in our ethnic enclaves, Now we're going to learn to live together. That's a whole different dimension. But the northern ghettos were hypocritical that we could do something together. We could go to the ball game together. But Mr. Cub, Ernie Banks never got a commercial, including for regular chewing gum. So beyond the playing field, we saw these. So we're honest and fair with ourselves and with our friends. We should point out two sets of rules every day, because at the end of the day, if whites had to run 7 yards for a first down, because they inherited some yards, and blacks had to run 12 yards for a first down, it'd be unfair, but also it would be ungratifying. It's unfair. There's something about fairness that's gratifying. When the Bulls play the Milwaukee in the basketball game or something, and you want your team to win, but if they lose, you can accept it because the rules are fair. Mm-hmm. And Dr. King keep coming back to the rules because we didn't earn slavery. It was the rule. We didn't earn segregation. Segregation was the rule. The number of lynchings that we endured without a single indictment, that was the rule. That's why most Americans have not read the Emancipation Proclamation. It's on your tables. The most fundamental date in American history was January 1st, 1863. Mm-hmm. That's what ended the first phase of slavery as the law, backed up by the whole weight of government military, January 1st. Lincoln, in effect, said to the South, if you're not rejoined by the 1st of January, I'll free your economic base. You cannot cut a deal with France and Britain with your cotton. I'll let them join them. I'll even declare them to be citizens. Ooh. And so, in light of that commitment by Lincoln, we waited and prayed. December 31st became what they call an active watch night. You watched and prayed all night, not looking for to a certain meal the next day in a ball game. We watched with 244 years of slavery end. And when Lincoln made that declaration, it got him killed, by the way, in the end. But that America became a different country, because the global community was into an abolition of slavery movement, and America was key to that proposition. Again, Dr. King had to give us some sort of historical context to give meaning to our struggle. And so I want to make sure that all of you, how many of you have read the Emancipation Proclamation? Be fair with me. Well, it's important to read it and then to discuss it, because no other group is required in the Emancipation Proclamation. No one else has required the amendments to the Constitution for the humanity. And we're still having to get laws to protect us from majority tyranny, even today.
So let me give a little context of one thing that Reverend Jackson just talked about. It's very, for those of you who don't know, it's very traditional across the various permutations of Black churches that on December 31st, we have what are called watch night services. And frankly, until I heard Reverend Jackson talk about this recently, I wasn't aware that watch night was and it's frankly not brought up enough, I think, in the Black church services, but it is the coming of the emancipation. It's not just the new year. It's a significant point in our history as African Americans, because the new year at that time brought us a measure of freedom.
The law we will live in our faith. We live under the law. We can chart our history based on what is the state of law. Mm-hmm. Slavery was the law. Jim Crow was the law, reinforced by the law. We live in, whatever your faith or non-faith, maybe you live in faith, live under the law. And so then when the war was over and the Union was spared and slavery ended, after Gettysburg and Antietam, Lincoln declared Thanksgiving to be a national holiday by executive order. It was always a fall festival for turkeys and the fruit of the season. But Thanksgiving was a national holiday based upon the reaction to slavery. Our French abolitionist allies gave us the Statue of Liberty as a gift. That Statue of Liberty was not designed to be a welcome for European allies coming as immigrants. It has become that. Statue of Liberty was a gift from the French abolitionists for ending slavery. A lot of that stuff is all clumped in now. And even when Gore wins but loses the 2000 campaign, states' rights as opposed to a universal declaration of the right to vote, a state determined national election, states' rights, that's very much federal Confederate law. Or when Hillary wins and loses by 3 million votes because of electoral college, it comes out of that same legacy. So the legacy of the slave and Confederate laws are more real than we're inclined to imagine. I think most northern whites are less sensitive to what those laws mean than southern whites whose roots in Confederate law and control is objects of worship. I'm not sure we appreciate what the Confederate flag really means. We would come in with the kind of immigrant flow. But in the South, the states' rights were voting, education, and labor, therefore right to work laws. States' rights over control of the voting process, electoral college, states' right to determine who's eligible to vote. All of that stuff is deeply rooted in slavery today.
So I want to cover one last topic with you, and then we'll open it up for questions. I want to take you to the time immediately before Dr. King's assassination, and kind of where he was mentally, and then I'm going to walk you through you going to Memphis and then what transpired. So can you set the scene for us, kind of leading up to his death in early?
The weekend before we went to Memphis, Dr. King called me on the Friday night and said, "Just want you to come to meet me Saturday morning." Doc, I really can't because, we have a bread basket meeting tomorrow morning. I was caught up in that. And so, well, try to make it. And then the Reverend Abernathy goes, "You got to come." So Martin doesn't feel well, so I said, "I'll be there." And Reverend Beverly, we came. So about 10 of us met Saturday morning before going to Memphis. And he came in a little late and said, "I've had a migraine headache for 3 days. I've been with Ralph, his wife, Juanita. I've been with my wife, Coretta. I've been with Anthony, his wife, Jean. And I'm under a lot of attacks. Many black churches were locking church doors in his face to say shouldn't be folks in the war, but just on civil rights. Many of the newspapers that embraced him as nonviolence in the face of terrorism, they were attacking him. He was 52% in the negative among blacks, and 72% among negative among whites at that time on the Harris poll. He felt the pressure of all that and said, maybe I've done as much as I can do in 13 years. Maybe I should consider quitting. I remember Andy Young said, "Doc, please don't say that." He said, "Andy, be quiet. Let me say what I want to say. Peace, peace. Don't say peace, peace when there is no peace. Let me think about it." And he said, "But I can't quit because if I were to quit, people like Frederick Douglass and those who never quit wouldn't accept me." He said, "Maybe I should just write, become president of Morehouse College and write and travel and speak. Maybe I should quit." And everything got real quiet. He said, "Then maybe our movement is divided if I would fast to the point of death. Then my friends who have different philosophies about approaches would come to my bedside, Stokely and Rapp and Floyd McKissick and Jim Farmer and the like, and we could talk together and regain our unity." They say, "But you know what? We can go on, stop by Memphis and fight these sanitation workers going to Washington, sit in, tie up traffic, and force the Congress to shift from killing in Vietnam to healing at home." He just started talking about shifting from killing to healing. He talked to me about the depression. And I took notes because it reminded me of Jesus' 3 moods. "Let this cup pass from me." As he taught disciples slept, and then not my will but thine be done. I watched those same 3 distinct moods that morning. And then we said, "Doc, if we get to Washington," they turned their back on us. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know. Let's go." So Bevel raised, "Where's the hook, Doc?" I raised, "Where's the hook?" He said, "Well, I don't know what the hook is." He was clearly been agitated by. I raised the question. I think we may have been a bit insensitive to where he was at that moment. So we'll see you in Memphis. So I left and came back to Chicago by family, and Brett Basket meeting was.
So let me just stop you and give
one second. And preached
ahead,
Liberty,
okay.
and I went to Memphis that Monday. He came in the next day because they stopped the plane, fearing that somebody a bomb scare on the plane. And he came in that picture of Hosea Williams and Reverend and Dr. King standing together on the balcony. That day. He came in a little bit early that day because a lot of attention.
I just wanted to give people a little bit of context before you kind of got to the final chapter. So what we're talking about in April of '64, Dr. King has now become an aggressive public critic of the war in Vietnam and has come to believe that, as you, I think, suggested earlier, all the money that's being spent on the war effort is money that's not being spent on addressing poverty and some other deep systemic issues all across the country. But there's a lot of, as you know, very controversial, a lot of division about the war effort. The Harris poll I hadn't heard about before, but it's consistent with the history, which is when he moved from the kind of obvious, I will say easier challenges.
Easy because you could identify them easier.
Yeah.
It required courage, it was risky, but it was easier to fight a bathroom sign in Alabama or something than gerrymandering, annexation at large, road purging. That kind of stuff is a bit more subtle and backroom stuff.
So the pressure, all of that sounds like it was very much present in his mind, and he was of mixed emotions about what way to proceed. Now you mentioned that we'd see in Washington. Tell us a little bit about what was the plan for Washington, and I want to talk about why he decided to go to Memphis in support of the sanitation workers.
Let me say quickly that I've gone through these moods because we will fight these wars to make America better. We face post-traumatic syndrome too. We're fighting wars without arms, but we're fighting wars. I mean, to live being an adult American or African American, and the two sets of rules, or sometimes three sets of rules, is taxing on the heart, on the mind. If you're not careful, you can become embittered by it. If you see the lack of value of that, you have to fight, choose to be better, not bitter. But there's a lot of things that work on the black person's mind, just surviving in such a dominant white world. I remember, I'll come back to the point, when Jack Robinson, it was not only that he hit 347 in 1947, he was playing on a team where whites on his team were hoping he would strike out. His team was pulling for the other team. Against those odds, he hit 347. I mean, you play on a team where if he wins, you win, because racism, they were willing to sacrifice their winning for him to lose. He died before he was 60. That's a lot of pressure to live under every day. And so we came to Chicago, as I said, for an education and fair housing. It really got needed, but it laid the groundwork for the work in Chicago, laid the groundwork for ultimately Harold winning in '83. And that helped lay the groundwork for Carol Mose DeBron. Chicago there's been more productive political advance in Chicago than any other city. 3 black senators, Carol and Barack and Roland, 6 black congressmen. I mean, a lot of stuff happening in Chicago happening in another city. And the break of the plantation mentality here had a lot to do with our being audacious enough to even try.
So let me take you back. What was the plan for Washington that you all were moving towards?
It's up a tent city between Lincoln Monument and the Washington Monument, and we moved poor people into the tent to expose poverty. Appalachian tent, Latino, and all of that tent. cotton pickers and fruit pickers and all that, going to various agencies of government to make poverty a discussion point. And of course, if he lived, we were going to use it as civil disobedience. That did not happen when he was killed. But the plan of the White was to put poverty on the front burner. Here we are today. The horizontal social gaps are closer. We're freer to drive from here to Mississippi today and stop where you want to eat. You know, my favorite was Cracker Barrel. Say amen, somebody. You know, you're free to do that today. The social gap has got, but this gap has gotten much greater. Fewer and fewer have more and more, and more and more have less and less. The vertical tension today, in many ways, is more substantial. Well, it is substantial for this time. And I look at these kids playing basketball. That'll be something coming next month called March Madness. Schools we couldn't get in 50 years ago, we can get in schools now, but to entertain. March Madness for basketball time, May Sadness for graduation time. The exploitation of our kids. We're going picking cotton balls, picking footballs and basketballs. The same schools that schools identified by the athletic program of a given school that does not look like Monday morning at that same school. Mm-hmm. So the dynamics of the fence change. What makes baseball good, the fence doesn't move back when you come to the plate, and the pitcher mound does not come closer. So whenever the playing field is even, we tend to do better. But right now, even now, when I saw Georgia play Alabama in the big game in Atlanta, I saw Wallace in one school does Sam Never, and Lester Matthews with his accent Sam Never, Dr. King in the grave saying yes. So that was a yes we can moment for me because I put it in some historical social context.
Mm-hmm. So why was Dr. King, given everything that was going on in Washington and this big focal point on the People's Campaign, why was he so intent on making what I think a lot of people believe was this unnecessary detour to Memphis to support the striking sanitation workers there?
Well, as we struggle for a hook, like Chicago housing became the hook, Jim Lawson called and said, Dr. King, 2 garbage workers have been killed February 1st, I think it was. And the pressure is rising on, should these workers have the right to organize? To support these workers is your point, working poor people. Most poor people are not on welfare, they work every day. Most are not black, they're white, female, and young. This is the place to come. And so it was like it was a structured movement as by housing workers' right to organize. It's like a hook that had substance and had a built-in following. And that's why we went to Memphis, because it was a chance to exhibit the plight of working poor people. If the sanitation workers don't work, the surgeon can't perform surgery because the disease in there. So the sanitation worker matters to him morally. The sanitation workers matter. That's where we went. And it was also a good way to prove our point about working poor folks in poverty.
So you were there in Memphis at the time when he was in the hotel and immediately before. Tell us what it was like once you recognized, I think almost immediately, that Dr. King was gone.
Well, the day before, we've been talking about the next levels of plans. And so he said, then that, and around 4 o'clock, I don't feel like going to church tonight to speak. And when I speak, I said, well, Doctor, I feel kind of empty, I don't have it. So he asked Andy, I think, Andy said, Ralph, you and Jesse go to church together. So we went to church. It was raining real hard. We got to Mason Temple Church. And the people were standing up cheering, a half full church, but cheering. So Ralph said, Jesse, they're not cheering for us. They think Martin is behind us. Don't fool yourself. So we went down to the back of the church. We called him on the paid telephone. And Martin, if you just come for just a few minutes, just let them see you. Just let them see you. I know you don't feel well. He said, I'll come. About 15 minutes he came. And we talked that day about how his father met his mother and all that. He kind of gone through his whole family tree, family lineage, should I say. So when he got up that night and said that if that was any time I'd love to be alive, I'd like to be alive now. If you listen to that speech, he talks about, and then at some point he made a switch and said, I'm not fearing any man. Now, my life has seen the glory and the coming of the Lord. He talked a bit about breadbasket in that speech, about using our leverage on businesses. He said, my lives have seen the glory. We had no idea, and I'm still not convinced what he felt, because you don't know what all leaders feel. We don't know how imminent death was to him. It certainly came off as he knew something. So the next day, so he speaks it, and he spoke about in that pathos. Like men were crying. It was like one of those certain kind of moments. The next day, we sat around the room talking all day, and he and Andy were throwing pillows. So around I had a band we put together in Chicago. Ben Branch and Wayne Bennett used to work by Blue Land, and the guys came down. We spent the afternoon on the carousel singing and playing the instruments. I came across the courtyard. He said, Jesse, you're an hour late. He was not. I was not. It was 5 o'clock. It was 6 o'clock. He was waiting. We were waiting for him. It's like, you've been late. He said, well, Jesse, you're not even prepared. You don't even have on a shirt and tie. Dr. King, the prerequisite of eating is an appetite, not a tie. He said, you're crazy. And we laughed. And he looked and said, Ben said, be sure to play my favorite song, Precious Lord, tonight. Because he had heard it being played at the breadbasket meeting in New York, Chicago, about 2 weeks before. And he said, yeah, Dr. And in that instant, that bullet hit him. I heard someone say, get low, because we didn't know if whoever shot was spraying bullets. We didn't know that. And I ran toward the steps. And then there's a picture of Andy Young and Reverend Jesse pointing. We're pointing because Dr. King is here on the floor of the balcony. Mm-hmm. And the police were coming with drawn guns. The shot came that way. Don't yeah. Go that way with your drawn guns. And I think 2 or 3 different things happened in response to that situation. What do you do when your back is against the wall? What do you do? You can adjust and be afraid. You can resent and just become full of anger. Or you can figure out how to resist. We chose the latter. We determined we're not going to let one bullet kill the whole movement. We're going on to Washington. Out of that, once the fires had burned to an ember, we started politically organizing. We had a meeting in Gary, Indiana, with 10,000 people at a big conference. We had a breadbasket family affair at the convention center here. 10,000 people came. 10,000, literally. Out of that came Coleman Young in Detroit. We started running for mayor. So we started running. And so, really, from the balcony in Memphis, the Broadbent balcony in the White House was 40 years through the wilderness. And the reason why I was so caught in tears that night when Iraq finally won is that I stood there in Grant Park where we had been tear gassed that summer of King and Robert Kennedy had been killed. I looked at who was there and who could not be there because either was dead or injured, distressed in some kind of way. It was both the moment and the memories. The moment of we won the big one. We won the big one 40 years later. But the memories of who made it possible, the people who made it possible, not the ones who funded campaigns. It was the common people of rural Alabama who took the whippings that Sunday on the bridge. They brought it to a head. That's why we always learn how to process pain into power and not react to pain with pain and fight darkness with light and fight hate with hurt, with healing, as opposed to reciprocating at that level. We learn how to process pain. And that's really one of these kind of moral jiu-jitsu of nonviolence. How do you process pain? How do you turn the ugliness into the beauty of the ashes? And that's where that came from.